All right, JD, I'm just going to get right to the point here. Does waterboarding work?
Yes, it does. President Trump is 100% right. Waterboarding is humane, it's safe, and we've waterboarded tens of thousands of American troops as part of their survival training. And the reason it works is because detainees get tired of it. There were only 3 detainees in the history of our CIA operations that were waterboarded. One of them, Abu Zubaydah, he was like an al-Qaeda travel agent. He was waterboarded to the point where he just said, look, I'm tired of being waterboarded every day. I'll tell you what you want to know. And guess what, Liz? He gave up the names of Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who was a Hamburg cell member, a roommate of the pilots from 9/11, and he gave up Hambali in Indonesia. Because those 2 guys were caught, Liz, we avoided 9/11 style attacks on London and Los Angeles. So yes, waterboarding does work.
Well, let me ask you, is it torture?
No, I don't think it's torture. Would we have tortured tens of thousands of American troops? Here's why it's called torture, because there were a lot of people upset with President Bush. I was a Pentagon spokesman for 4 years during that era. So a lot of anti-Bush people just said, hey, look, it's torture. It's inhumane because it's not comfortable. But look, no detainee was ever injured from this. They basically were wet, cold, and scared. It's not pleasant, for sure. But if we were going to waterboard tens of thousands of American troops, I would not call that torture.
Well, I certainly hope not. What about the argument that it is so unpleasant that detainees or prisoners of war, whoever they may be, that they give false information just so that they can stop the waterboarding?
Well, that's a possibility, but look, we only waterboarded 3 detainees during the Bush administration. None were at Guantanamo, by the way, which is another urban legend. So 3 detainees, and we had thousands of conversations about it. One of them was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11. And it's not like what the movies show. The movies show these scenarios where people are just getting tortured and they can't take it, so they give false information. Waterboarding is meant to break down a detainee's resistance. So they're just like, after a period of weeks or days, they just say, look, forget it. It's not worth not cooperating. And there are ways to see if they're truthful or not. So yes, waterboarding did work, and it prevented 2 9/11s in LA and Los Angeles. And there's a good book about it called Courting Disaster. A friend of mine, Mark Thiessen, wrote it. He was a White House speechwriter. I'd recommend people look at that book, Courting Disaster.
Right, very interesting. Well, let me ask you this then. Maybe this is the question that I should have asked from the beginning. Is there anything else besides waterboarding that works as effectively as waterboarding does?
Well, I would say waterboarding is the most effective. There are other coercive interrogation techniques that can be used, but President Obama just didn't want to go there because he was part of this political movement that was anti-Bush. So he scrapped a lot of these coercive interrogations. And you know what it did, Liz? It tied the CIA with its hands behind its back. So they weren't able to be as effective with capturing detainees and getting information out of them. It's a real shame.
Right, and I think the priority, that maybe this is a conversation for another day, but the priority there was a little bit different too, because I don't think it was President Obama's priority to ferret out these terror cells overseas. JD, let me ask you though, last night on that ABC interview, what did you make of President Trump saying that he personally thought his information, his sources told him that waterboarding works, but that he was going to defer to Mattis and Pompeo, who say that they're not going to use that?
Well, he's trying to defer to his cabinet secretaries, and we'll see if they evolve on it. Certainly, General Mattis told him that he didn't think it was that effective. He thought it was more effective to have beer and cigarettes. Well, a lot of senior intelligence people would disagree with that. So I think as we move along, we'll see what happens. But I think he's trying to show some deference to his cabinet picks, because they had tough confirmation hearings just now.
Right, and to be honest, as a viewer, as an American, as a voter, I appreciated actually his transparency in saying what he thought and sharing his train of thought and how he got to where he got, because it was something on the campaign trail that he said, yeah, we're going to bring back waterboarding and stuff that's a whole lot worse than that, but now he said that they're not going to use that in his administration, and he shared exactly why, and I appreciate that. I appreciate his willingness to fight back at an enemy that, like he said, cuts off the heads of American citizens and innocent people around the world. But JD, let me pivot and ask you about this enemy, ISIS. I mean, there's a recent report that they're weaponizing drones now. Now, their use of drones is not new. They've been using it for aerial photography. They've been using it to map their targets. You can see this propaganda video on our screen now. They just released this. I believe it was 38 minutes long. They're showing how they're using weaponized drones now to seek out and kill their targets. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's a nightmare, and I think that we should have seen this coming a long time ago. We've had IEDs on the road for quite some time, and then vehicles using explosives, and now it's these drones. So that's one of the reasons why I don't think we should have Syrian refugees here, because who knows who's coming from ISIS, infiltrating us here, who has knowledge about how to strap bombs to these IEDs, these aerial IEDs, which you could buy over the internet. You could buy these off of Amazon.com. It's not complicated, and it's a nightmare for our security.
Right, and let me ask you this. I mean, this is not just a threat here in the United States. This is also a threat, I suppose, in European nations who have been under attack by radical Islam, by ISIS, more even than we have this past year. Is America prepared to defend against this kind of weaponized drone? And then separately, are European nations prepared?
Marginally prepared, because we have our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agencies doing everything they can to collect information, which goes back to the need for good intelligence, which goes back to the need for coercive interrogations when you capture terrorists. One thing I wanted to bring up, we talked about it last week, and that was Bradley, then Chelsea Manning, releasing those 700,000 documents, including videos in Afghanistan and Iraq. We talked about that collateral murder video from the helicopter. One of those things that I think that we see from that is jihadists getting recruited. Who knows how many people were killed because of Bradley Manning releasing those videos?
Right, and I mean, it all ties together. Like you said, one thing leads to another. If we don't have the intelligence and the strategies, the tactics, the interrogation tactics to get that information, then it leads to things like this, which just comes back to attack us again. JD, I always appreciate your analysis on this stuff. Thanks so much for being here.